Dear learners, welcome to another module where we will be looking into interview skills. And in this module, we will try to have an idea of how to go about an interview, the different kinds of interview, and specifically job interview and media interview. But before we get into knowing all of this, let us just remember that interview, and in order to perform well in an interview, one needs to look into how one is able to use one's soft skills perhaps, besides the hard skills, if you remember, and the knowledge, and perform well in an interview. So let us move forward understanding what interview is all about. Now if you just look around you, you will see that there are various kinds of discussions that go on. There are conversations that go on. Interviews, though they are conversations, are actually a different kind of conversation where first of all, if it is a formal kind of an interview, remember that you will have two persons, a person who puts forward the questions, the other person who responds to the questions that are put forward. It might be also, like you have a panel of interviewers and there is one interviewee who responds to the panel. There are also, in interviews, you will find that various platforms through which it is conducted. So interviews are, if you then think about what an interview is, it would be like, you have interviews which are actually conversations. After that, what happens? Conversation which is guided by a specific purpose. Then, once you move with the specific purpose, it is also about time. An interview cannot go on forever and forever and forever. And it cannot be like, you have one episode of interview and the second episode again continues. That doesn't happen. Another point that you need to keep in mind is the fact that interviews are goal oriented. So you do not have, suddenly somebody coming and asking you a question and you are giving an answer. That is not an interview. Okay. So it is not primarily simplistically put a question answer session. So like in the classroom, when the teacher is talking to the students, discussing a lecture, giving a lecture, the teacher puts forward questions and the students answers. The student may answer in union, or there might be a single student who responds, but that is not an interview. All of us know that would be a discussion, that would be a group discussion, or it would be a classroom discussion. So if we think about interviews as guided conversations, as time-specific conversations, as goal-oriented conversations, then we might arrive at a definition, a general definition of an interview. How do we define? We can say that an interview is a goal-driven interaction that comprises questions and answers, clear structure, and controlled in a formal environment. So if you look at the definition that just now I had tried to present to you, you will see that there are a few components which you need to keep in mind. It is a goal-driven interaction. So interview is an interaction. Also, it would have a clear structure. So suddenly you just say something and then feel that it's a question and you expect that somebody will be able to answer to your question, would not do. So it has to have a clear structure and then control within a formal environment. If we begin to understand the interviews as an interaction, we can also say that it might be a dual conversation, usually between two people. It takes place between two people. For example, in case of a job interview, okay, you have one, say the director of a particular company, the CEO of a particular company sitting and inviting the candidates, and you go and give an interview. That might be a case, or you might also have a panel of interviewers. So in interviews, as we had understood earlier, you have a very formal goal-oriented environment. So for instance, if you are applying for a PhD program, you need to be clear about what you wish to do. your interviewers would want to understand what kind of framework have you planned in with regard to the the PhD dissertation, the PhD thesis that you are planning to write. Whether or not it goes in the same pattern as you have envisioned, that is a different question. But it is important that you are able to deliver the idea, that there is clarity in your thought process, that there is a logical, rational process of thinking and putting things forward when you are facing such kind of academic interviews. It is important that you also remember that interview skills as an interviewee, as a person who is going to give an interview, you have to remember that it is also something that has to do with your communication skill, because after all, whatever knowledge you have, whatever sort of information or response that you want to give in the way of answering the question, it has to be communicated. So your communication has to be skillful, it has to be effective, it has to be adequate, it has to be sufficient, not going overboard, so that you do not create a negative impact. Okay, so having said all of that, if you look at the interview as a proper session or a module, something like that, you will see that there are two components which are very important, or who are important. One is the interviewer as well, and the other is the interviewee, because the interviewer plays a very significant role. The interviewer has to play a responsible role. The role of the interviewer is not to create a nervousness in the interviewee. It is not to create this, a sense of fear in the interviewee. The interviewer has to be very proactive. It is the task, the duty, the responsibility of the interviewer to create an ambience that would provide the interviewee with a feeling, with a sensation of being at ease, so that one can perform well. So let us think about what would comprise of this whole idea of interviewing, because interviewing is also an art. So the interviewer's responsibility, what would be the interviewer's responsibility if the session of interview has to proceed, has to move forward in a proper, desirable direction? Okay. First of all, before getting into what what makes a good interviewer, remember that according to the diversity of the platform and purpose, the art of interviewing will also differ. By platform, what I mean is, you will have, say, very formal platforms like, office interviews where you go. Just now I said about the academic interviews, all of that, job interviews, these are very formal platform. There is another platform, the broadcast platform, the radio, okay, where you listen to interviews. There are eminent personalities from diverse fields who are invited to the studio, and there is a conversation. So that is why it is also an art, And then we also have the telecast interview, where you have television, you have the visual medium through which you are, watching an interview, where you have, again, prominent personalities, people who are important, people who have contributed, substantially in a very, very unique, unparalleled manner, who become an inspiration to the other people, and they are sitting there for an interview, and there is an interviewer who discusses, who puts questions, and then it gets into conversational mode. Remember that in the formal interviews, like the job interviews and the academic interviews, the scope for becoming, getting the conversation into, getting this interview session into a more conversational mode, the scope is somewhat limited compared to these kind of interviews which are conducted in print, broadcast and telecast. The conversation remaining informal has to be crafted very carefully, because you are reaching out to the interviewer. I'm talking about the interviewer. The interviewer acts like a bridge between the interviewee and the audience to whom the interviewee tries to reach out, or the interviewer acts as a medium through whom things can go out to a broader perspective, to a broader audience. One has to remember that nevertheless all of these work within a broader framework. So that framework, that design has to be maintained even while you are apparently as an interviewer working with informality. So it is important that while you are interviewing, acting as a person who has to put forward questions, and also at the same time trying to maintain a very, very congenial and amicable environment, you have to be also careful that you do not digress so much that it goes out of control. On the other hand, if we look at academic interviews, for example, which are conducted with you say, for instance, research interviews, where you have, as a student of research, you need to go upon a field study. So how do you that would contain a part of that field study may also have certain questionnaires which you distribute amongst your study, the people with whom you are interacting, or you're trying to collect data. So what do you do? How would you design that questionnaire? It is also an important part of your interview. So your questionnaire has to be very, very thoughtfully designed. It has to have specific questions based on the topic, based on the theme that you are trying to deal with. The questions cannot be vague. It cannot be, insensitive. Your approach should be objective. Now, what is objectivity? Your question should not be such that it disturbs a certain, cultural value. It disturbs a certain linguistic value. It has to be objective in order to, direct the interviewee towards response, which would allow you to get hold of the knowledge that you are actually intending to derive from that kind of data collection. And importantly, you have to be impartial in your treatment of the data that is collected. Let us now get into, job interviews, for example. What would be a job interview like? As the subtitle, it says job interview. So we understand that job interviews will be, at the end of the job interview, as an interviewer, one is trying to find out the best candidate for a particular job. And as an interviewee, you are trying to, prove that you are the best, you are the most suitable candidate for a particular job. So what type of questions can one frame in a job interview, or what kind of questions can an interviewee expect in a job interview? There would be, you can club the questions into a particular thematic or, thematic patterns. For instance, there would be common interview questions. You enter the hall or you enter the room, and after your formal, you wish the person there, and you sit down, you take your seat, and then you will be put forward certain common interview questions, such as what? Such as, what is your name? Tell us about yourself, your educational qualification, your hobbies. Okay, these are common questions which are intended to bring out the or not to bring out exactly, to set the process of interview in motion. There would be then another set of questions which might be termed as competency questions. So what would be competency questions? Competency questions primarily would, try to assess your eligibility. The primary eligibility is already understood. That is why you are called for the interview. Say you have the desired qualification, the desired marks, and certain desired extracurricular and co-curricular competencies, all of that which has been asked, desirable qualifications are there. You have passed a certain exam, and after that you need to go and sit for an oral interview. You need to meet the people and have a personal interview, face-to-face interview. So the first part of that face-to-face interview would comprise of those common interview type questions where the warming up session is, it is introduced. Now comes the important part, the competency questions. Now remember that in your common interview questions, because that is the very, very initial interaction, while remaining specific and precise, you also need to be, conducting yourself with proper body language, with proper, linguistic skills, using your language properly, using, certain words in a manner so that it helps you to bring out whatever you wish to say in the best possible manner. Okay. So now when we come to the competency questions, as it says competency, it would try to assess how competent would a person be. Remember that at times, you will find that somebody has secured a very, very high percentage, yet unable to get a job. Okay. These pertain to the interview skills. The interviewee, it is not merely important that you get good marks. Good marks would be the first step towards the second, towards facing the interview. Good marks are essential. This is not to say that good marks do not carry you anywhere. It will carry you. But when you get to, face interviews, it is important that you also possess other skills. So this is another, competency. When you are answering your questions that are posited to assess your competency, it is important that you respond in a manner which makes it evident that you are competent. Okay. Then another set of questions might be there for the interviewee, which can be clubbed as hypothetical questions. This happens mostly in sort of corporate sectors, because there the situation is more or less different from a government unit. In a corporate sector, you need to manage people, and you need to look within limited limited maybe facilities. I don't mean limited facilities in the sense that you don't get a good office room or something like that, but for a government machinery to run, you already have an overarching framework within which the government offices perform. But in a corporate sector, because it is a corporate sector, it is a handful of people who are running the entire machinery. It is important that somebody who is applying for a particular post in a corporate sector needs to have certain additional skills. So in a corporate sector, there might be hypothetical questions, for example, which might assess the situational or behavioral crisis resolving abilities in the potential candidate. Say a candidate has fulfilled all the academic and competency skill based phases. He or she has cleared all of that. Now that in the hypothetical situation, an imaginary situation might be given to you as an interviewee, an imaginary context might be given to you, and you need to respond. So in that case, if you haven't at first, remember, you haven't yet been absorbed into the job, but here is a question which asks you, for example, what would you do as the head of this, you are running this team, you are in the control of the production team, and as the production manager, what will you do if there is a certain crisis in the unit? So if you become nervous, and if you say that I will do this or do that, certain very, very strict and very limited, confining sort of response that you give, that will create a negative impact. Most of the time, we come across, job interviews where you have seen advertisements which say come in, drop in for the walk-in interview, and then you have personal interviews. So walk-in interviews or personal interviews, all interviews at the same time, as an interviewee, one who is going to face the interview, you need to remember, even in case of personal interview or walk-in interview, you have to be very, in control of yourself. Your nervousness should not get, the upper hand. You need to appear very pleasant, because the moment you make entry to the room, this is the first time that the panel or the person who will be interviewing you looks up at you. So your demeanor would definitely carry a lot of significance. So you have to be calm, because you will be given a job. How can a nervous person, an anxious person, a stressful person, the slightest provocation, if you become anxious, how will it be possible for you to be in control when there will be a very many number of such difficult situations? So it is important that you are able successfully to give the impression that you are the right candidate, you are the best candidate. So that positivity should be reflected from your demeanor. Secondly, you enter and you are asked, you wish the person or the panel who are there to take your interview. Sit down, be polite, say thank you when you are asked to sit. Unless and until you are asked to sit, please do not sit. When you will be told to sit, please sit down and say thank you. While you are supposed to answer, speak with clarity. You have to be clear. Okay, it might be that you are, not very fluent in English, or you are not very fluent in a particular language in which you need to be. Remember that fluency is a different thing, but you are interacting here. Your competency in this case, your skill in this case, should not be focused only on the language part. You need to communicate. So be confident. So it is important that you have clarity. And in order to be clear, you also need to choose your words carefully. You have to be very, sort of thoughtful, mindful when you are trying to speak out something. It should not be muffled. You shouldn't mumble, okay? And whatever you say has to be audible to the interviewer, okay? So all of these are also very important when you are facing an interview. Your clarity, your sound, the voice, the tonal quality, all of these would indicate that you are confident while you are facing the interview. Your confidence will be reflected in the manner in which you respond, okay? Also remember that you should not interrupt the interviewer. You will see that there are, while putting a question, a person might need to have a certain span of time. There is another thing. In your response to the interviewer, you should not sound very arrogant. But when it came to, conversation, when it came to responding to the interviewers, somehow the interviewee showed, signs of arrogance, and that creates a very, very negative impact upon the interviewer. Your communication has to be very, very, it has to create that impression that the person who wishes to communicate, who wishes to, put forward a conversation, is a person who is proactive. That arrogance and, that defiance, sort of indifference, very casual about everything, would reflect very poorly upon your abilities, because then the employers will have a doubt whether responsibility can be thrust upon you or not, which would be very, very important when you are interacting with people, to resolve crisis, to do things that you need to do, or to gain optimal, performance, highest kind of performance. So remember that while you are talking, while you are responding, while you are in conversation with the interviewer, remain within the specificities of the conversation, of the question. Now, when you are asked about certain incompetencies, for example, it cannot be that whatever the interviewer asks, you have been able to give 100% performance. very seldom, very rarely that would happen. In most of the cases, there would be, say, out of 10 questions, you have answered 8 questions. In 2 questions, you are, not very comfortable. You did not do good, or you are, not very confident. So what do? Should you tell a lie and say that, okay, I did this and I know this, but now I cannot recall, something like that? No. It is always advisable that you accept. You say that I apologize, I am unable to do this, or I am unable to say this. At present, if this is a skill that is required, a particular skill, 10 point if you give to that skill, 8 point you have already acquired, you are lapsing, you are lagging behind in 2 points. You can always say that I will, given a chance, I will acquire these 2 also in due process and give my best performance. You should not say that, okay, I have the rest of the things, so why should you question me about this? That arrogance, that defiance, or that sort of, indifference would always, make you sound very defensive. And that would not be a very good thing to happen in an interview. Let us get into the other form of interview, the media interviews. Okay. Now, what do you understand when you say it is a media interview? Now, what is media? Media, generally speaking, may be understood as the varied tools and technologies through which information is disseminated. So, you have various agencies, various tools, various technologies through which you are, you disseminate, you spread, you make people informed. So, there are, various platforms for this sort of dissemination. Media, okay. In the conventional sense, media would include print media, broadcast media, and telecast. So you have print media like newspapers and magazines and leaflets or whatever like that. You have broadcast, as we had already seen, radio, right? And telecast would be television and the visual media. Okay. We also have come to the 21st century where we have seen revolutionary changes in the world of media, in the field of media, and we have passed through this age, and now we have come into new media, which would include mobile journalism. You have your social media, Facebook, Twitter, so many platforms where also you have interviews. But for our sake, because it's a formal platform, again, because we are into the academics of this whole thing, we would look into the conventional media while we are trying to understand how interviews need to be conducted, or need to be you need to participate and be a part of media in the conventional form while you are going for an interview. Okay. So media interviews can be for entertainment purpose or serious discussions related to matters which are equally serious. Okay. So when we talk of media interviews, now what is it that is distinctive in a media interview? Media interview is essentially considered, it is a professional part of a journalist's career. A journalist who works with different forms of media, mass media, that is, he or she would at one point of time perhaps or as a part of his or her regular reporting and writing and a career of journalism, interview also forms a component. Okay, so the journalist may become an interviewer, and as an interviewer, the journalist might be working in the print media or in the electronic media, which is telecast or broadcast. Okay, so for the journalist as an interviewer, there are certain do's and don'ts. There are certain things that the journalist needs to remember while being a part of that media interview. So what can the journalist do? So first of all, you need to have a topic. And how do you choose the topic? So what do you need? You need to research not only about the topic, the relevance of the topic, format, what kind of format. That interview has to be such, because the interview is meant for a specific time, you see. It has to have a particular format so that most, beneficial aspects can be drawn out of that session. If at all you really wish to have a proper interview, you need to have a proper background research, the context, the format, the time, the topic, all of that has to be decided, designed, properly structured so that the impact of that interview is received. You get a positive impact. As an interviewee who faces the media, it is a rather challenging task, because as in other forms of interview also, the interviewer is in control. The interviewee, the respondent, doesn't pose a threat. It doesn't challenge the interviewer. It is the interviewer who would be, posing a sort of, a stressful or anxious kind of, presence, because you never know what one might ask. Okay, so that is something which is mysterious, enigmatic. So the more popular and the more experienced the interviewer, the more sort of, the interviewee might feel, at times anxious. Okay, so in order to face such interviews, one should be, as a respondent, go with an open mind, has to have good communication skills. Okay, and remember that the questions that will be put to you as an interviewee also might be, clubbed as into different categories. Say the focus questions. So when there is a question about, say there is an interviewee who is doing exceptionally well in a particular field. So focus questions will be pertaining to that particular field. Factual questions, certain facts pertaining to what is happening around. If it is an interview which has, the thematic, essence of the interview is to generate social awareness regarding, say, for example, COVID and the secondary, impact of COVID. So facts have to be there. You as an interviewee need to be very, very clear, very, very confident, very, very strong on your facts. Avoidance questions. There might be questions which might, slightly tickle you. It might be intended to, to sort of provoke you to some sort of debate, but you know that you need to avoid, that your communication skill will come to your help. You need to have a proper answer, you need to have a proper choice of word, and with clarity you can make it very, very evident that you do not intend to answer that question. You might say, I apologize because I am not the proper person to give you a correct answer, and I am afraid that I do not intend to create any misrepresentation or any misinterpretation of a certain circular, of a certain notification. So I would rather not answer your question, and you might please excuse me for that. So that would stop the provocation. There would be hypothetical questions also. So in that case, you can imagine and then give an answer which you understand would not lead the discussion, the conversation to further, sort of confusions or provocative, sort of ideas. Okay, so you need to know, you need to have this, good communication skill. Your soft skills, your body language, your gestures should be, it should be evidently in a positive direction. In telephones, so what do? It is the impression, the voice, the modulation, the tonal quality of your voice. It has to be pleasant. You have to have the basic decencies of calling the person, of prior, fixing the interview at a prior time. You suddenly, because you are an interviewer, you are an employer, you cannot suddenly just say that, okay, you just call the number and say that you can just come in and we have the interview like that. No, it won't do justice to the interviewee. For the employer, it is important that you do not create any sort of inhibition, any sort of apprehension in the interviewee. Similarly, for the interviewee, it is important that you, as a prospective, employee, build up that confidence, build up that personality, which would add very, very positively towards the larger, hard skills that you have acquired, your core skills. It would enhance your core skills. Okay, so eloquence and your overall personality all of these, if you look at it, good communication, soft skills, body language, gestures, eloquence, eye contact, overall personality, these are all prerequisites which will allow an individual to perform well in an interview. Okay, so we come to the end of this particular module on interview skills. I hope you have understood or you have been able to understand what interview is all about, and thank you.